Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Staff, roll call.
Attendance noted.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes, study session, and regular planning commission meetings of December 9th. Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, doesn't look like we have anyone in the audience that is here for items not on the agenda, so we'll bypass that and move on to a public hearing for 166th Street West, the Hub Center, amended planned unit development to allow a charter school serving students in grades 6 through 12 to operate in the former Valley Total Fitness building. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Jabs and Commissioners. I'm pitch hitting tonight, so you might want to cut me a little slack, but I will try to provide all the information that Melissa put together. The addition of a new use not included in the final development plan is considered to be a major amendment to an approved planned unit development, or PUD. The owners of the Hub Shopping Center have applied for a major amendment to permit a charter school called Flex Academy to operate within the former Bally's Total Fitness building. The proposed school will serve approximately 300 students in grades 6 through 12. Parking requirements for the proposed use are easily met within the shopping center, and no plan for a specific designation of spaces is proposed. No student busing is proposed as part of this either. Younger students are anticipated to be dropped off by parents and guardians, and older students may arrive in a variety of ways, whether it be dropped off by their own vehicle, walking, bicycling, or taking public transportation. Parking requirements take this flexibility into account. Flex Academy administrators will work with the city's transportation engineer and public safety department to develop a student drop-off plan that will not be overly disruptive to the mall or the surrounding neighborhood. Applications for land use permit amendments require compliance with current code standards. Historically, the city has required the addition of parking lot screening when new uses have been introduced into the shopping center. The screening has typically been required adjacent to the new use. In this case, however, it would be difficult to add parking lot screening on the perimeter of the property because it would result in an odd lot configuration that would create confusion in an already difficult parking lot. In past situations, the city's Public Works Department has occasionally allowed required screening to be located within the public right-of-way. In this case, however, Public Works staff believes that would be inappropriate in this location because it would conflict with the future plans to reconstruct 65th Street. And I would just note that that reconstruction came about through the connectivity plan for the Lyndale, the Lakes at Lyndale area last year. Instead of providing screening in the right-of-way, the council could require the screening to be provided along the northern boundary of the site in exchange for excess parking. However, this would create the odd configuration mentioned above. Existing parking exceeds the requirements by over 200 spaces. Alternatively, or additionally, the council could require the addition of parking lot islands in order to reduce impervious surface, which also exceeds allowable limits. An amendment to the PUD requires the applicant to make improvements to bring the property into compliance with current standards, except for where it is determined that changes would be extremely impractical or extensive. Additionally, alternative landscaping and screening plans can be approved when they are found to be in compliance with the purpose and intent of the requirements, so not necessarily the letter. The total parking requirements for the shopping center and school is 855 spaces. There are currently over 1,000 spaces available through the site. The findings necessary for approval of an amended conditional use permit, final development plan, and planning unit development are described in the city code and are further articulated in the attached document, which I'll get to in a minute. Among the critical issues, an amendment to a PUD, final development plan, and conditional use permit requires that the city evaluate the development conformance with zoning regulations. non-conforming site improvements are governed by the zoning code. The intent of the regulations is to improve properties without requiring impractical site changes. And historically, the parking lot screening adjacent to new proposed uses has been addressed. In 2011, the property owner was made aware of the fact that if and when additional amendments were requested for areas throughout the site, additional site improvements will be necessary. The applicant has attempted to comply with these requirements in a manner that was originally thought to be acceptable to the Public Works Department. After additional consideration, however, Public Works Department has recommended against the proposal, given that the screening could one day be removed as part of a reconstruction project of 65th Street. Staff is recommending the approval of the amended planned unit development with conditions that are shown in the resolution. And one of these, I'll get back to in a minute, but they are listed at the bottom of the first page of the resolution. That is that the city engineer and public safety department assist the applicant in developing an appropriate student drop-off plan, that required planters in front of the building must be continually maintained and include live plant materials during the spring, summer, and fall, and decor in the winter, that the conditions and stipulations of all previously approved plans not specifically changed through this amendment remain effective, and that the recipient of this PUD record the resolution with the county in the required time period. So the one that to get back to is landscape requirements. And again, the language in the code talks about two things. One is having the screening there, but also it talks about that except for where it would be extremely impractical or extensive, to some degree that's a judgment call on your part, what is or what is not overly extensive or overly impractical. The adding islands in the shopping center itself, I can't tell you what the actual expense of that would be. That's something that the owner could address. Perhaps I'm not sure if they've looked into it. So with that, I would take any additional questions you might have.
Okay, John, one question I had was, on 66th Street, what's the plan for 66 that you refer to as far as renovation or
what I
reconstruction?
referred to was 65th Street, actually.
Okay.
Yep. And
Sorry, 65th.
yeah, right now the sidewalk on 65th is it's substandard. It's not as wide as it needs to be to accommodate pedestrian traffic. And so if that already narrow sidewalk had landscaping taking up a half of its depth, it would make it that much more of a difficult situation for pedestrians. What the Public Works Department has told us is that in the near future, like within the next 2.5 years, they would like to reconstruct at least the right-of-way on 65th Street, provide a better pedestrian access, and that would likely include tearing out the sidewalks and the landscaping that is there to make sure that a compliant sidewalk is located there. I think a compliant sidewalk means it's at least 6 feet in width. So that's the future there. On 66th Street, that also is slated for reconstruction by Hennepin County. Hennepin County is going to be doing all of the county roads in the next, I would say, 7 or 8 years. We know that Portland Avenue is first. What we don't know is the order of 66th Street, Penn Avenue, and Nicollet. And so I can't tell you if 66th Street would be reconstructed by Hennepin County in 2 years or in 8 years. We also don't know exactly what the configuration will look like, but we do know that the sidewalks on 66th Street, especially by the hub, are inadequate. It's really difficult for an able-bodied pedestrian to walk there. If somebody has a walker or a wheelchair or just needs some extra space, it's almost impossible to go through there without having to weave through the parking lot.
Okay, thank you. Other questions of staff?
Yeah, I would agree. It's
Tom?
a horrible parking lot. On that north side, entering the parking lot from 65th where the school is going to be located, are there any plans to stripe this in such a way that, I don't know if you could, lessen the amount of traffic that would be there from the grocery store and everything else? Was a little concerned with, yeah, even though students were going to be dropped off, you're still going to have 300 students milling around. There doesn't seem to be a set cutout or anything like that there for someone dropping off. Usually when you came into Bally's, you came into the parking lot, parked, walked into the building.
Yeah.
But this is somewhat different than that now, what's being proposed.
Yeah, Tom, I just want to add on one thing. I sent a note over to staff this morning, just the same, I had the same concern you did. And I think
Same page?
we are on the same page, yeah. Yes, 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 yes. And I actually kind of did a sketch just to kind of outlay that a bit, just as a discussion with them, whereby you kind of take out, in effect, you create a triangle out in front of that building per se, which then allows you to come in off of 66th, but you don't use that or 65th, sorry, 65th, and allows you aren't allowed to use that first lane that's right up by the building type deal. You, in effect, in just what I'm proposing, and you guys can think this through, but just food for thought, was basically to come in, disallow that, give a nice clean space so it looks nice aesthetically, maybe some grass there that captures some of the rainwater, blah, blah, blah. You're not talking about a huge area, but it would then kind of would stop that first lane. You'd have a turn basically there that'd take you back into those back parking lots right along the building.
Okay.
To kind of ease that, because I have the same concern you do. Now you got 300 people instead of what was, kind of here and there type deal.
Yeah.
You'll have them coming in. So I'll let them talk to that. But just to know.
Additionally, one of the questions I had was, and I suppose you guys can answer it once you get up here. How many faculty members and staff members?
Yeah.
You're talking about 300 students, but how many other folk are going to be there as well in addition to the 300 students?
What we could do is let them come up and speak a little bit and maybe give us some input, and then we'll come back to that. So this will be your opportunity at this time to come up, unless you had anything else directly to staff. Okay, so let's do that. You can go over here, and then
My name is Zach Wazaloo. I'm here representing the Flex Academy Board of Directors. So thanks very much, commissioners and staff, for reviewing our application as well as discussing it this evening. The Flex Academy is very excited for the opportunity to be in Richfield and serve the students and families of Richfield and the surrounding communities. It's a charter school, so charter schools. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Okay. Charter schools are administered by the state. We are authorized by an entity named Innovative Quality Schools, which is authorized by the state of Minnesota. Charter schools are funded by the state and the federal government, so that for the parents and students, there is no cost, no tuition. We, as stated in the application, are looking to open up about 300 student school. I believe that's about the capacity of facility that we're contemplating here. We're looking for a relatively even grade distribution, grades 6 through 12, so it's 11-year-olds to 18-year-olds, and just about even distribution, so 50 or so kids per year. The school, as your question earlier, if it reaches capacity, when it reaches capacity, has about 20 to 25 adults and faculty working there, everything from instructors or state certified teachers to academic coaches to the administration of the school, as well as other support staff. So what we're trying to do in Flex Academy is pretty exciting. So this is the blend Blended learning, this is the blend of online education with face-to-face instruction. So the idea is that the students are receiving curriculum online, and they also have their peers and state-certified teachers on site for classroom instruction time. So you spend some portion of your day in an individualized learning environment in a workstation, working at your desk at your pace, according to a plan that's very much individual to you as a student. And you spend another part of your day in small group instruction. We find that lots of students end up having the same types of problems, either where they want to accelerate their learning or whether they are looking to overcome an issue. And they spend time with their instructor working on blocking those issues. So it's a really new, innovative model. Flex Academy is entering into an agreement with K-12 Incorporated, which is the management services and education curriculum provider. So there's more than 100,000 kids currently across the United States who take or have curriculum at some portion through K-12, and Flex Academy is excited to have a partner that has experience doing that. That's an overview of the school. Tonight with me, Jeff Agnes, the architect we've been working with, and he can answer many of the technical questions. Matt Johnson with Brixmore, they're the owner of the mall. To speak directly to your discussion of traffic flow, we're very open to working with the traffic engineer and your safety department, whatever works. We've had great success at some of our other partner schools where it's just a matter of getting the flow right, and it's a matter of having the faculty and or parent volunteers outside, particularly in the first couple weeks of school every fall, getting people right? You come in this way and you leave that way, and you don't go any other route, and that works. And we want that as well as you do, not only for flow and not to interrupt other tenants or residents of the area, but also for safety. We want to make sure that there's access for life safety and access for the fire department to the building if anything should happen, which we hope never does. In addition, I'll add one more thing. School culture is very important to the way a positive educational school runs. And so kids and their academic program and how they're going to approach their studies and how they're going to approach school is a part of not just the books and the writing and the working on their math and their English and the social studies, their science, but it's also about how they conduct themselves both within the school and without the school. And so it's important for the school culture that we would like to be able to enable the students to have, that they'll be good citizens in the school and outside. And so when they're going to school, they're going with a purpose and they're going to school. When they're leaving school, they have their school program and they're going home. They're not loitering, right? I mean, kids will be kids. They'll do what they'll do. But we're going to do our best to make the school culture be a positive educational experience so that they're focused young citizens. That's our hope.
Can I just ask you, how do you integrate this? I know this doesn't have to do with the planning commission, but I'm just curious myself, so I'll ask it. But how do you interact with the students to make sure that they take part in the community, become a part of the community? Because obviously not all these will be coming from Richfield,
right?
I would assume. So looking for some interaction with our community to make sure that we've got a feeling that we're in this all together, and that again they take pride in Richfield, just as we do.
Yeah. So I think that there's lots of ways to do that. A lot of that will probably be shaped by our first head of school, who we're out currently right now advertising for, to attract the right person to it. And so there's many ways we've done it in the past. Some of this is internship opportunities for your high school students, where they're working with local community members to be, learn about the working world while they're in school. And that's something we've done. Work programs where students get a portion of maybe a day or two a week to go and be work at a various place, and we think that's a great way to integrate with communities and adults. And then there's also opportunities to give back to communities. We'll have, hopefully service days where the students can be a part of cleanup efforts or whatever is appropriate for them. And it's, it's different, right? We're talking about grades 6 through 12. So middle school and high school are going to have varying elements of this. Middle school oftentimes has a little less of this sort of outside involvement. High school has more as they become more broad and defined. But those are some of the approaches we've had, but I think that that's right now one of the many things that we're trying to plan correctly. as soon as we can get our new head of school on board and begin to fill in the blanks of, we want positive school culture, we want community interaction, we have a list of things that have worked in the past. Let's now start to implement them.
Yeah, question?
Yes, to that end, a couple things. I assume you're not gonna keep them indoors all day.
Mm.
So what do you plan to do with them? How are you gonna, take care of, getting kids outside during, days when it's not 50 below?
Not a day like today, yeah.
Yeah. You know, like, other questions too, meals, kids are going to eat there, or they're gonna be free to leave the building and go to surrounding restaurants or whatever,
Mhm.
especially the older kids, you know, 11th, 12th grade.
Sure. So the first question about outside time or physical education time, so we're trying to do this in two parts. The first is inside the facility is one of the rooms, well, it was a valley. So one of the rooms is actually going to just remain to be an exercise room. So
You know what?
one of the rooms is going to remain in its current use, is going to be an exercise room.
Okay.
So within the facility will be a space of almost 800 or 1,000 square feet, where the students will have specific health education or physical education classes. And then in addition to that, we are hoping to be able to make an arrangement with nearby Lifetime Fitness. So some portion of the week or some limited time frame, we will bring a portion of the student body over there to have a gym experience.
It would be like a coordinated walk, a whole class.
Oh, wait, this
would
is
go
a
over
whole
time.
faculty event, trust me. You get everybody in a group and you kind of go back and forth and you bring at least one of each gender faculty so they can bring them to the locker rooms and all. It's an operational plan.
Sure.
And then in regards to meals, we've had success fully catered meals. And so what you have on site, the facility is what's called a retherm oven, which is a big heater. So it reheats catered meals. And you have two large industrial style refrigerators that you can keep all the cold goods. And so those two things together provide service for both breakfast as well as lunch. And how they pay for it depends on their ability to benefit status, whether or not they're paying a small amount for it or whether or not the state is providing for the students.
Okay, so it's not anticipated at all that the kids would leave that facility and go to Louisiana Food or any of the other restaurants. They would be just there. They wouldn't be wandering around the parking lot going to Burger King or something like that.
Well, the catering will allow for an option for all students inside. What we've had success in some of our other high school programs is you have an opportunity to earn the right to have outside lunch.
Okay.
And it's oftentimes, it's always been an academic right. So if your grade point is above 3.5 or whatever the head of school principal determines, then those students get to go to lunch. And I've seen this at other schools where you'll see the handful or so of kids who have this opportunity and they're waiting for their other friends. I know Johnny's coming. I want to go outside. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will that also apply to kids who reach driving age? Will that be attached to academic performance if they're allowed to bring a car and park and so on?
Well, at a certain age, we don't necessarily have as much control, particularly given the fact that it's just a very large mall and a large parking lot. So they can, once they are legally allowed to drive, they have that option. Okay. And there's no really way for us to police it. Although we found, particularly looking at the age range, we're really only talking about 11th and 12th graders, so it's less than 75 or 100 total students, maybe, probably a lot less than that. And even of that, you find that of this, the students who are generally interested in this type of school don't always have access to their own car. If they do, they don't always have it. They don't always have it that day. So we found driving to be a really minimal part of the total population. But who knows? It depends a lot on what students are attracted to at the school.
Okay. And again, just one quick question. The question I had before, how many faculty and staff member do you expect in addition to the 300 students?
Between 20 and 25,
okay.
And that's a mix of Minnesota State certified teachers, as well as the administration, as well as the other support staff, counselors, as such, that'll be on site.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, given the blend between an online environment and a classroom environment, how many students do you see being on campus at any given time? And then sort of a follow-up to that, like what do you see as the sort of the peak hours of campus, you know, when there's going to be the most activity there?
It's a very good question, and it relates very much to the world that's changing in terms of this online education. This school, Flex Academy, and particularly the blended learning type that we're looking to implement, is an 8 to 5 or 8 to 3, depending on the exact school day, experience. So students, as part of their plan, are expected to be on site from 8 to 3, Monday through Friday. Now, what they're doing on site is very flexible according to their each student's educational plan. So, you know, how they're spending their day, how much time they're having in a direct classroom instruction, how much time they're having in their workstation, how much time they're having in project group time is much more flexible, hence the name Flex Academy. But that's the difference. They are going to be on site all the time. So we'll see, you know, everyone comes around 8 and everyone leaves around 3, except for those students who are coming either early for clubs or tutoring and or the opposite at the night, staying for clubs or tutoring.
I just have one more question.
Sure.
When you get going, I assume we passed this and so on, do you plan to have an open house and that kind of stuff where we can go through and actually see what this looks like and kind of get a feel for it?
We would love to invite you to that. Jeff and I were just talking about the best way to do that. So we're hoping with the construction drawings to be able to have a nice plan to show people with color drawings and sort of present people how a student's day goes. And we're planning to have open houses through the spring, assuming everything goes well through this planning process, and then open in the fall. And then you're generally doing, you know, you have at-large or ad hoc opportunities for the public to come see it, but you're doing open houses or sort of big events about once a month leading up through the summer and the school year. So we would really love everyone to come check it out.
Yeah, maybe you could, along the way, as such, schedule something where we could, as a group, go and maybe just stop in and see what it's like and kind of get a feel for what's going on.
We would love it.
Yep.
And we'll definitely invite you. And then we would hope that you would mention it to many
Sure.
other people.
Okay.
Thanks.
Actually, my question's for Brickmore, so if you've got one more for.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious also, what is bus service like to the school? And then do, you know, a majority of students choose to take the bus, or do they walk, or do they get dropped off by parents? I'm just curious about what, you know, those peak times are going to be like as far as vehicles coming in and out.
Yeah, so we've definitely seen this very widely according to age. Clearly, the younger students are either parent-driven or buses, and then the older students are effectively managing their own way, carpooling with friends, carpooling with families, or taking public transportation, or in some cases, walking, biking, skateboarding. The bus service, one of the things, our understanding of the charter school law in the state is that we have the opportunity to share with the public school system busing. So there will be busing service available for the students. Again, it's a little hard to predict because we don't know the student population today, but the opportunity is there. And so a part of the traffic flow diagram or plan that we certainly want to work together on is going to be there's flow for buses and there's flow for students. But again, we found great success in this in terms of just, it's a matter of having adults outside managing it. And that really, really works.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes.
Which person, the architect or for him?
I guess the architect would probably
Architect.
be better.
Okay,
Jeff
so if you want
Agnes.
to step up for a minute and help us out, appreciate it. State your name and so on. Tom, you go ahead.
Hi,
Relative to-
Jeff Agnes with A Architects here, architect for the project.
Thank you. Relative to transportation, within the mix of students, you anticipate many those riding bikes. I was going to say bikers, and it may not be the term I want to use.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pedal-type bikes. And if so, are you going to make revisions, put in an adequate number of bike racks and a secure location?
Absolutely. That
those.
was, actually was part of the original discussion with Melissa and the planning staff, was to make sure we had bike racks, and that certainly the plan. And I would imagine, Zach, that, need more, we add more. We're starting with a certain amount we think will be right, and then we'll adjust as we need to. But yes, that's part.
And I didn't notice anything in particular in the notes here, but are you planning on changing the facade of the building in any way? Are you gonna different windows and things like that?
Yeah, about the only thing we're doing to the facade is really adding windows for some classrooms inside, and that was done with the original architecture in mind, so it really won't look much different. But we're adding windows so that they look like they've always been there. So, but that's really the only difference, the only change that we're making to the outside of the building.
Okay.
And I think that's in your pack, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Where we have a demo plan showing where we're cutting openings and where we're putting new windows.
Other questions? Okay, well, just curiosity, have you guys thought about the transportation, the in and the flow in and out yet, or what's been the discussion relative to that?
Most of the discussion has been just making sure we're working with you guys, with traffic control, and Zach's very confident. He's done this so many times before. He's very confident we can get the flow to work. Just a matter of making it work for you guys as well.
Okay. Question is staff then, relative to the, if this moves forward and we make the motion, how do we incorporate that to make sure that fits everybody's scheme, that it's safe and that we've got that taken care of?
Well, Chair Jevons, if I might, because I'm kind of familiarizing myself a little bit with this, is the plan that the drop-off plan would be done prior to getting to the city council, or would that come later?
Really up to you guys. We're certainly willing to sit down with traffic right now if you prefer. So that's really up to you guys. Again, both Matt and Zach are very willing to work with you guys as far as the flow goes.
I guess it would be my recommendation to at least have some preliminary discussions before it goes to the city council to identify where that would happen, at least the basics of it. Certainly the details could be worked out later once they have a better understanding of how many buses, the bus sizes, those kinds of things, but at least get the basics underway. And I guess the other thing I would recommend, and maybe these could find their way into the resolution or the way it's worded, would be that, obviously the plan that Mr. Agnes submitted shows the parking lot perimeter landscaping in the right-of-way, and Public Works came back and said that won't work for them. I'm not sure if Mr. Agnes has thought about alternative ways to address that concern, and if so, ideally that's something that would be in the packet when it comes back to the city council.
Okay, I'll give you just in 1 second. So I think what I suggested to you today was just my preliminary, hey, what do we do type deal. But I know that end is terrible for the way that it just converges into one spot. So that was my main concern, is that I can share the drawing obviously, but basically it just takes that front end and just makes a diamond in front of it so that you don't use that first lane to come into the lot. So the one that's right up against the building would not be your one. You'd kind of pull it out, which then kind of pushes out the traffic a little bit, gives you a little bit of free space in back. And so I guess that's what I'd put out there as just a suggestion for the discussion, at least to get started. But I think transportation is going to have to, or engineering is going to have to look at that and see how that fits in and makes it work for them. But it seems like that would then take away some of that everything coming into one flow, even on an exit type situation. So that's where I'm at.
And I think, we definitely at the staff level hear that, and we heard it from a couple of commissioners. And so that's something we will pass along to the city council and the staff report, that was a concern, kind of what I would call the channelization of traffic in the parking lot, and making sure it's a safe situation for pedestrians. We will share, we did not have a chance to share your sketch with the applicant. We got that today, but we will be sharing that with them.
Just one other.
Tom?
And this may be more for you. This is an awful lot of work. There are going to be things, effort and money spent on this building and so on. What's the long-term projections for being here? 10 years, 15 years? I'm just want to get an idea of what the time commitment is.
Yeah, the time commitment is as long as possible. I mean, you find with a school, particularly you find a good location that you want to stay forever. Although forever is a really long time. But the intent is to open and be successful for long term. Charters are authorized in Minnesota on a 5-year cycle. So every 5 years you go up for renewal and you talk to the state, they investigate your educational outcomes and how the students are doing and your practices, and then they renew you as long as it all goes well. So that's the length that we can look according to state law. But the intention is that you make the investment and you open and you're here for multiple renewal.
Okay, and just to follow on to that, right now you're looking at 300 students.
Mm-hmm.
What is your projected growth over that period of time, whatever it would be, 5 years, 10 years? Would you anticipate trying to increase enrollment from 300 to 400 or what?
So we don't anticipate getting to 300 in the first year, right? So this is a matter of growing grades over time. You open with 6th and 7th grade and probably 9th grade, and then you grow those grades as the kids grow older. So you find that there are specific entry points where families decide to make a change of schools, and so they say, that 6th, 7th grade is a big entry point, that 9th, 10th, well, mostly 9th grade is a big entry point, and you grow from there. There's not that much transfer, there's some in the other grades, but you grow outward. So the intent is this facility at our current operational plan has a capacity of about 300 students. Maybe there's ways to fine tune it. We can get 350 or 400, but we don't know that today. Today we really believe that it has capacity of about 300. And we'll get there in a 2 to 3 year time frame, hopefully. And that, sort of depends on how the Court of Public Opinion determines and how student test scores do and the strength of the principal and a whole lot of factors, a lot of hard work.
Okay. I certainly wish you a lot of luck with that part of it. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yes.
And you're looking to open start enrolling fall of 2014 or this year?
Correct.
Okay.
Fall 2014.
Okay, and then John, I see that you're in your thing to the council, you basically talk about the parking plan. So maybe we've covered it in the section where you talk about the applicant will work with city engineering and public safety to take care of it.
And I thought about that as well. The
Yeah.
resolution is really the resolution you're proposing to the
Yeah.
city council. It's not your own per se. So I think as long as we can convey to the applicant, make sure we've addressed some of these things before it goes to the city council, that should cover it.
Yeah, agree.
I would just add, Matt Johnson's here from Brixmore, who's the property management and ownership company, and we've been in discussions with Matt ever since Valley's left about a good reuse here. And this is an unusual building in terms of how it's laid out on the inside and the shape of the building and all kinds of things. And to be honest, we were really concerned that there wouldn't be a right user. So from the redevelopment side, it's really exciting to find an adaptive reuse that makes this much sense.
Okay. Any other questions that I'm seeing here? Yep, Gordon.
One question for staff. So through the exercise of reviewing whether or not screening was possible or not possible and the various compromises, given that right-of-way isn't going to work and the rest of the layout for the development, is there a potential for creating screening, or I'm just trying to understand staff's recommendation clearly. Was it that screening really wasn't going to work in this space with this configuration?
Well, To some extent, it was a timing issue. We found out from Public Works staff late last week that the proposal to have the screening in the right-of-way was not their preferred alternative, and we just haven't had the time to explore other options, other alternatives. I think that this is the kind of thing that we can find a reasonable way to address it, especially given the fact that there's more than adequate parking. If some parking spaces were lost in this case, that wouldn't be the end of the world. There's almost no developments in the past I can remember that we would say that about. So we do have that going for us here.
Well, and in looking at the plan, it would actually seem that loss of parking will be likely in order to accommodate bus and other traffic, particularly if the entry point happens to be to Chair Jabs' allusion that he was alluding to, that the existing flow doesn't work very well.
Mhm.
But if the entry point were the further east location and the exit point were the further west location, they would lose a whole aisle of spots to a drive aisle.
Yeah. Yep. One of the things you have to ask yourself too on the parking lot screening is, from whom are you trying to screen the parking lot? And if we can get one of the maps up there showing, we have kind of the surrounding zoning map or other things in your packet that you can see with the curve in the road there, there's a large kind of triangle area that doesn't have any homes. And so really it's the two multifamily residential that are just adjacent to the railroad track that you're trying to screen the parking lot from, in the case of this particular user. And so what I don't think we want to do is force a solution that's not addressing the problem. So we do want to take a look at that edge of the parking lot. One of the things that we've picked around and just haven't had a chance to explore. I know several of you are familiar with some of the larger planters on Penn Avenue. That's something that perhaps Public Works would allow in the right-of-way because it's not so permanent. And then at whatever time that the right-of-way is reconstructed, those planters could just be relocated elsewhere and reused. So that's one of the things we wanted to explore.
Okay, Josh, did you have a question?
So, I guess I have essentially two sections of the question. First one's going to be for Mr. Agnes as well as Brixmore, and then following up and making sure that staff has the room they need as it's proposed currently. Are you guys amenable to a revision of the parking lot for an aesthetic purpose? I guess what I'm looking for is, we don't get the opportunity often to have excess parking and do something with it that might make the facility more appealing to the surrounding community, the neighborhood, other tenants in the building. Is that something you guys are willing to work with staff towards? Is there any objection to that?
Well, Matt Johnson, Brixmore, so I'm the leasing representative for the property there. That's a good question. There are other uses that, have certain parking requirements for their use within the property. So we have some limitations on that end. So I guess, I guess there's probably a medium between the two, between, making it more aesthetically pleasing and, allowing for the uses that are already there, so to speak.
So the question then for staff is, obviously I'm a big fan of islands and trees and things of that sort, and that may be the one extreme. The other extreme might be, some grass planted somewhere. I mean, that's sort of, somewhere in there is what we're going to end up with. Does this recommendation, as we're proposing to give the council, assuming it comes out of the council looking something like we're sending it to them, does that give you guys enough wiggle room to find something in between those two markers?
Well, it might be helpful to word something in the recommendation that the applicant's encouraged to submit a revision that would better address the landscaping needs. you know, this particular parking lot, I think, is the one most known in the communities for being confusing and not that well laid out and lacking in landscaping. And so you're right, this is an opportunity that we may not have again for a while.
Okay, and then just one last thing. I mean, it appears that we've got the parking or the in and out situation labeled in here, so I think you're okay with that piece. It's the landscaping piece that really needs to be identified as far as what we want, so I think, if I understood that correctly?
Yeah.
Because the rest you can deal with and kind of get to the council and have them some kind of a plan
Right. And,
generated.
you know, I guess the most succinct way I could say it is, we don't know exactly what we want, but
Yeah.
we know we want better.
Yes, yes, okay. So as far as the landscaping requirement, what's the feelings relative to that? Because it's a question mark right now in the motion.
I guess my preference would be that we give staff the latitude, you know, that we're allowing, so the same type of latitude that we're allowing through the transportation plan, and that same, I don't want to pin down and say, there must be elm trees and 6 foot, you know, I'm not going to make that sort of edict. Well, that would be my preference. So if you've got the room, let's, you know, I want to make sure that they've got the ability to kind of, you know, find a solution that's going to work both for Brickmore as well as the city and the school itself.
So something to the extent that just says it's worked out with staff that there is a buffer or screening plan discussed and approved. That easy? Okay. Being that, then, I don't think there's any, question? Comment?
Just one comment. I haven't seen your sketch, but
Okay.
if we're going to be doing something that helps flow, if there's any kind of landscaping involved in that, the timing may be such that we start with the traffic control before we go to the landscaping.
Yeah.
Because it's all gonna work together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, with that, then, I think we're done, so I ask for a motion to close the,
That
Okay.
we accept the proposed resolution. with
first
the-
close the public hearing.
Sorry.
Want to make that motion?
I'll move to close it.
Seconded.
Motion and a second, close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now your motion.
I would move the resolution as constructed by staff with the additional corrections that we've just discussed relative to traffic flow and the landscaping.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Okay, good luck. And
What are
we'll
the
look
school
forward
colors?
to it.
Orange and green? Curious, just curious. Oh, actually, orange and green is kind of Miami, you know?
The U.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then. New business is item number 2, a finding of consistency, TIF District 2014-1, City Garage Site Staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jabs. On January 14th, 2014, the Richfield City Council discussed the establishment of a TIF district for the former City Garage and Gleason's mortuary sites. While there is no current development proposal for these sites, the buildings contained on the sites have been deemed to be structurally substandard, thus qualifying the site for the creation of a redevelopment TIF district. As a result of that discussion, a public hearing to consider the establishment of the 2014-1 redevelopment TIF district has been scheduled to occur at the February 25th City Council meeting. If the City Council and HRA were to take the necessary steps to establish this TIF district, then the HRA and City Council could use TIF funds to later reimburse them for the money expended on demolition and environmental cleanup. These funds would be contingent upon an adequate development occurring on the site within 5 years of establishing such a TIF district. And it would be that development that would pay the additional taxes to make this possible. Policymakers would also have the ability to make a future decision about the allocation of any additional TIF funds that would be generated by such a development. Minnesota state statutes require that the Planning Commission consider whether the creation of any TIF district is consistent with the Richfield Comprehensive Plan. Our review of the comprehensive plan found a number of statements that could be viewed as being supportive of the proposed TIF district. Most specifically, the statement that Richfield will continue to promote targeted redevelopment efforts in order to continue to replace aging and outdated structures. Really, this is a means to an end. It gives us a funding source to take the buildings down. The buildings on the outside look horrible. On the inside, they look much, much worse. We are seeing evidence that people are getting into the buildings, and the concern is somebody's going to get hurt in these buildings. So, with that, I would take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Josh?
I do. I'm looking at what on my packet at least is page 48 of 80. And it looks like the TIF district will include some of those private residentials. Is Richfield now, is the HRA now in possession of both of those lots on the northeast corner of the block?
No, and really, they're being included to keep future options open.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
Once the buildings are down, and I assume you're gonna do some cleanup, is there any temporary use of the land that is permitted? For instance, parking cars from the local dealerships that are along there, or some other passive use that wouldn't require construction of any buildings or anything like that? Is there anything like that that is allowed and does not affect the TIF?
Sure. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that I talk in the staff report about environmental mitigation. And really what we're talking about there is the environmental concerns of the buildings themselves. So, for example, any asbestos-containing pipe wrap or floor tiles or those kinds of things. What would not be addressed at this point in time is any soil corrections. There may be some contamination in the soil. The reason that's not being addressed at this point in time is because every end use has a different requirement for how clean the soil is.
Yeah.
And so we don't know how clean to make it. And we also don't know the layout of the ultimate use. For example, if ultimately the southern third of the site is going to be parking lot, that's a much different requirement than if it had buildings on it, because that is what they call a confining layer, wouldn't let any contaminants leach down. So the site's not going to be cleaned up. Having said that, you probably could use it for things like parking cars or pretty non-intensive uses. We have looked into that, however, the issue there is if it remains unused as a city parcel, it's not taxable. The second it's used for something, it becomes a taxable parcel. And so that's something we would have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of. What are the benefits versus having to pay the extra taxes? So, yeah, I think there are some options in the future for kind of non-intensive uses. I just don't know exactly what those are. The thinking, to be honest, is that it would probably be fenced off and just kept intact until a development was found.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Susan?
Come up
Yeah.
to make an even,
Right now, there are 2 single-family homes on the block.
is there 2 of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the HRA owns one of them, the one on the northeast corner.
Okay, I'm
Uh,
looking at the one that's right below the 4 on that
Yep.
page 3, yeah.
And that is owned by a private individual right
Yeah.
now who, in the past, has indicated on numerous occasions that they're not interested in selling.
Yeah,
So that's, again, where we're just trying to keep our options open by
Yeah.
including it. I don't think that the HRA will be in a position to purchase that anytime in the near
Okay.
future.
I just remember that during all that conversation when the apartment controversy was going on
Mhm.
last year. But that's owned by a person who's bound and determined to stay there, from what I remember.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I don't doubt that when and if this gets developed, that would be controversial. Luckily, though, this step in the process shouldn't be.
Yeah,
so-
right.
Okay, anything else? If none, I'd ask for a motion.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, no old business unless anybody's got anything. Then we'll move on to liaison reports for Community Services Commission. Tom?
One of the things that is being done is that Jim Topetsoffer reported that he is working with Holy Angels. There is a proposal to artificially turf the lot that is behind St. Peter's and Holy Angels. They're working on that. He also reported that the problem that was reported in the paper relative to soil conditions and so on at the ice arena that may hold up the construction of locker rooms is actually less of a problem than what was reported in the paper. And he is actually anticipating that being resolved and being able to move in sometime in March. So that was certainly really good news. And there are some openings on that Community Services Commission that I think they're still looking to fill. So if people would like to do that.
Okay. City Council? Who's got that? Oh, maybe Dennis had that.
Dennis, I
Never
think,
mind,
had it.
we don't have anybody. Okay, Housing and Redevelopment?
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Richfield School Board?
Yeah, just a few interesting enrollment statistics as to follow on the coattails of a discussion about a charter school. So total enrollment is up about 17 students, but down just shy of projections. Average class size ranges from about 25 to 27, depending upon the grade level. As far as open enrollment, 534 students have opted out of Richfield, and the majority of those go to Minneapolis and Bloomington. And overall, there are about 55 more Richfield resident students attending charter schools this year. And the high school is going to start a trap shooting team that will be coached by the police liaison.
Thank you. Chamber of Commerce?
No report.
No report. And anything else? Okay, hearing none, ask for a motion to adjourn. All in
Chair
all in
Jabs?
favor? Oops, wait,
Sorry.
stop.
Yep. If you flip over the agenda, you'll see under City Planner's Report.
Oh, my goodness. I missed it, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize. Not adjourned yet. Go ahead.
So the topic of renaming 77th Street has been kind of percolating around for a few years now, and it's something that the City Council would like to pursue, and they'd like to get the input of the Transportation Commission, the Community Services Commission, and the Planning Commission. Those other two bodies, I believe, have had a discussion this month already about the renaming. I'd sent out a memo last week that touches on this. It's the similar thing to American Boulevard, which at one point in time was known as either 79th or 80th Street. It would be the same here, where it's for the majority of what's considered for renaming in Richfield anyway, it would be 77th Street. When you get around Emerson Avenue, around Meridian Crossings, where it makes that motion and it goes up to 76th Street and continues on that way in Edina. The thinking is that if the renaming were to occur, ideally it would include 76th Street in Edina. So this is something we'd work with Edina staff on. So, there are some questions. Is this something the Planning Commission thinks is a good idea, is supportive of? Whether there's particular stakeholders that you think we ought to be including in the discussion, whether there's a process you think we should be following, and if you have any names, which is, I think, the fun part. People like to throw out names. The name I've heard, well, I won't tell you the name I've heard.
I suggest
quite yet.
92nd Avenue. I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, just,
Well, they're-
okay, Josh had a question first.
I do have I'm sorry. Are we talking about we're talking about 77th, okay, so Menards crossing over 35, and then would we also then be looking at renaming the stretch of 76th Street, which is no longer a thoroughfare? So we're really talking about the renaming of two streets, or are we talking about the renaming of the 77, 76, just,
Correct. The portion of 76th Street, for example, that has the bikeway on it, that would remain 76th Street.
I have heard that there's a sentiment to try to name it something that would incorporate it into the airport, particularly with the underpass in mind, if that ever goes in under Cedar, and continue it on. I think renaming a street is a big deal. It affects people living along there, businesses that, you know, have a letterhead and so on. RBCU, for instance, would have an expense. It's something that would have to be metered in. But certainly, looking at what Bloomington did, unfortunately, American Boulevard is taken, unless we want to say American Boulevard North. But it can be used to put a brand on an area of the city, and I think that that area is going to need it as we do redevelopment. Maybe even some discussion with the people affected along Cedar and what development that we have looking there. Do we want to name it in such a way that it could be looped up as well along Cedar? You know where I mean? 77th ends and it comes up around Cedar and goes north, that area. Pardon?
so, I think we
That's up by the Cedar Point.
But ultimately, the idea is Richfield Parkway would continue down south all the way
Right.
to possibly this new 77th. Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, if and when the tunnel goes in, you wouldn't have that kind of curving motion that takes you directly from 77th onto Old Cedar. It would be more of a traditional intersection.
Yeah. I'm just saying, if we were going to do it, coordinate it.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments?
Is there precedent for this in Richfield?
Not that I can recall. No. Well, Richfield Parkway
Yeah.
would be the one.
Right.
You know, that was 17th or 18th Avenue. And so when Target and Home Depot came in, they were given Richfield Parkway addresses, while the houses on the other side retained their 18th Avenue addresses. You know, and that's something we're gonna have to do, is work with the post office. You know, I don't know how much transition time they give, you know, if they deliver mail to both addresses for a few years, I just don't know.
And if
But
we're-
I think the logical thing to do, since it's north of American Boulevard, would probably be to name it Canadian Boulevard, but I'm not in any way, shape, or form a proponent of that, but just for geographic simplicity. I think.
Josh, did you have some comments?
I did. I'm sorry. Presumably, I mean, obviously the chambers for Richfield Chamber of Commerce, and if we're really working with Edina, perhaps their chamber would like to weigh in as well. If we haven't at this point engaged them, they certainly would be at the top of my list of people we'd want to engage with, in addition to the Transportation Commission and possibly just, you know, some blurb in the Sun Current to just sort of get a vibe from those that live in this community. So.
And would it be worth reaching out to the city of Bloomington to talk a little bit about their process, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In terms of what it looked like, what their timelines were like?
So has any name been mentioned?
Well, the
I've
one-
heard some, but.
Yeah, the one that seems to have gained the most traction is Lindbergh,
Oh.
for a couple of reasons. Lindbergh, there are three reasons for that. One is there are two Lindberghs, two Charles Lindberghs that would be, kind of connected with that. And I can't remember who had which middle initial, but one of the Charles Lindberghs was from Richfield, took the flag up to Iwo Jima, and the other, of course, would be the Charles Lindbergh that flew across the Atlantic. The former Charles Lindbergh, the first one I mentioned, I can't think of anybody that would be opposed to that. Charles Lindbergh that flew across the Atlantic, I think, had maybe some checkered history that people might or might not be real fond of having that name. But it is a name too that's been associated with the airport over the years. So I think the notion was that it would be named for the Richfield Charles Lindbergh that took the flag up at Iwo Jima, but to put Charles A. Lindbergh Boulevard, it would probably be too long. We would all know which Lindbergh it was named after, and it would just be Lindbergh. But, yeah, I don't know. I think that's open.
So if there is already this out there as far as a thing, why not put something out on the website that basically looks for people's opinion?
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about doing. Matt might have something to add to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're actually implementing we're going to be rolling out a new way of interacting with residents, a more official, currently we have the Facebook page, Twitter account, things like that, to engage with residents, but we're actually rolling out something that's a little more official, formal. It's from a company called Mind Mixer. Other cities, Edina has a different platform. Eden Prairie, if I can get my suburbs straight, is also using it. We're going to be rolling it out. It'll be known as Richfield Connect. And the launch, I believe, is February 4th. So that's a great suggestion to have that to be one of the first questions that we push out to residents and get feedback.
Just put a like or don't like, and then a section if they want to leave some comments on something that they would recommend. But at least you get a feel for what's out there as far as those that participate in using that site. So yeah, I think that's the way. Anything else? John, anything else for you?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed my item.
I renew my motion.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey, I sent you.
That's okay. But Steve,